Hello and welcome to Learn Live. Today we're celebrating International Women's Day and our focus is women in Parliament. I'm so excited to be joined today by 3 women members of Parliament who sit in the House of Commons and in the All-Party Parliamentary Group, Women in Parliament. So a huge and really warm welcome to Apsana Begum, the MP for Poplar and Limehouse, Jane Stevenson, the MP for Wolverhampton North East, and Tonia Antoniazzi, the MP for Gower. So thank you all so much for joining us today to answer our questions all about your experiences as women in politics. And thank you to all of you watching as well. I know we're joined by students from all across the UK and we're really excited to hear or answer all of your questions. So without further ado, we'll go to our first question, which is what is it like being a female MP? So Apsana, would you like to come in first and answer that?
Yes, fantastic. And hello to everybody that's joined us. So I'd say, I mean, in terms of what it's like to be a female MP, being able to really represent the views and experiences, as well as shine a light on issues, campaigns, and how the law can be improved in so many areas for women, is something that makes the role so rewarding and meaningful. Thinking about the fact that it's only really been only 100 or so years where we've seen women get the right to vote. Being one among many women in Parliament really feels an honour to be able to, I wouldn't say give a voice to the voiceless, because I don't think it's the fact that people, especially women, for example, haven't been given the voice. I think it's the fact that they've had their voices suppressed for so long. So I think in that way, it feels really privileged, and it feels like an honour to be a woman MP. That does come with its challenges. It is a challenging environment being an MP, and an even more challenging environment to be a woman MP, because there aren't still enough women in positions of power. But actually, also at the same time, so much research shows how much more positive women's leadership really is, and so much research also shows how collaborative we are. So it's a challenging environment to be in, but it's really rewarding to be able to be among other women who feel strongly as I do about making those changes to make sure that politics and Parliament is so much more open for women, and to really make sure that 150% we work to, hard to get that 50% of recognition is something that changes over time. We have a seat at the table. We want that to be a much bigger table. We want more, and we'll keep working hard for it.
Oh, thank you so much, Apsana. Jane, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Becca. Yeah, it's been a great privilege to be elected as an MP. I'm still a new MP. I was elected in 2019. So I'm still finding my way around the very big building. So that's an achievement in itself. But I think it's been fantastic. I came up through local politics. So I was a city councillor in Wolverhampton. And it was really important to me to get involved in politics. I've always said politics is far too important to leave to other people, and it affects so much of our lives and so many decisions, the laws we live under, and we need the people making those decisions to be a balance. So it makes sense. We need women, we need people from other minorities, we need people from all walks of life. So it's that diversity of experience, and I think it's just been a great, very steep learning curve. And we went into the pandemic only 3 or 4 months after the election. So we've had to help a lot of people, but that's really rewarding. And, it's that sense of being able to change things positively. And I think that what's been lovely about being a female MP, I think that, those things apply to both genders. But as far as women colleagues across the House, women MPs, I think there is a great support network cross-party and in the APPG. And I think it's actually been a really positive experience to see that there is that drive, there is that support going forward. So no, it's been a great first year, and I'm looking forward to the rest of my term.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Tonia, would you like to come in next?
Yeah, hi. I've been a member of Parliament since 2017, and with the snap general election, it literally was a 6-week turnaround from my normal life to be thrown into politics. And I've absolutely loved every minute of it, because it's been an absolute privilege. And having that privilege and being a woman in Parliament has been very important for me. 20 years I was a school teacher, teaching French, inspiring future generations, and I genuinely feel that the girls that I have taught and the women that come behind me will feel empowered to go into politics, because if their French teacher can do it, anybody can.
Well, thank you so much. What a nice way to end that question. Thank you, Tonya. So Apsana, could you maybe tell us, we know there are 650 MPs that sit in the House of Commons. How many of those members of Parliament are women?
Yeah, I mean, there's in total, as you say, 650 MPs. 220 of those are women MPs, so that's just over 34. That's just 34%. So that's just over a third. So we're looking at maybe 1 in 3 MPs are women. So I'm going to visualize that next time I sort of sit in the chamber. Maybe just imagine sort of one man sitting to the left, one man sitting to the right, and knowing that's the battle that we've got ahead of us. But that's 12 more women MPs than in 2017, the 2017 general election. So that's showing an increasing sort of positive trend of women, coming into Parliament and being MPs.
Oh, thank you. That's what International Women's Day is all about, isn't it? Celebrating how far we've come, but also acknowledging the challenges that we face in the future. So thank you. So all three of you are part of the All-Party Parliamentary Group Women in Parliament. Could you perhaps explain to us what an APPG is and what the aims are of the APPG? I'll come to Jane for this one.
Thanks, Becca. Yeah, an APPG is an all-party parliamentary group. And there are so many, there are hundreds, I haven't counted them, but I chair one on dual diagnosis and complex needs, which deals with kind of social problems if people get into debt, maybe they turn to substance abuse, and it's about very many elements. But this particular APPG is about women in Parliament, and our aim is to encourage sort of talking about women's issues, making sure the pathway is there for people to follow us into Parliament. I was the 511th female MP ever elected, which doesn't sound like a very big number at all. So I think all women who are lucky enough to be elected, I think we all are aware that there is that legacy, and we are responsible for encouraging more women in, making them aware this is an option for them, and politics is a career choice that might suit some of the people. So the APPG, it's been really useful. And I think, again, it's a chance not just to see what you see at Prime Minister's questions with people shouting at one another, but it's, it's women coming together, whatever our political party, to work together.
Thank you so much. Tonya, what sort of work is the APPG doing in order to improve the experience of women in Parliament and to get more women in?
Well, events like today and having these conversations with parliamentarians to realise that it is possible to step into our shoes and to see what it is like to sit on the green benches. I think having these conversations is really, really crucial to empowering women. But, we are working together, discussing how we can encourage people and support women in Parliament, and supporting each other in a sisterly way, cross-party, is very, very important. And that's what the brilliant thing about APPGs is. We're all parties, we're there, we have a common thread. We may be fighting for other kind of causes. I'm the chair of the APPG on cancer, and we work together with one common goal. The common goal here is to encourage women to get involved in politics. And also, I always use the analogy that politics is a little bit like a rugby team. It's there for everybody. We've got to get, there is a place on those green benches for everybody in society. And the more diverse a parliament that we can get, the better politics will be. Because people put us on a pedestal, and there's no need to put us on that pedestal. We are everyday people. We walk around the streets, we talk to people, we have families, we are mothers, we are daughters. And I think that's a really important message that the APPG for Women in Parliament does get across and needs to continue to do so.
Well, thank you. That's a great message for everyone watching, as well as a place for all of you on the green benches in the House of Commons. So let's move on to our first question from a school. So this is from St Patrick's Catholic Primary School in Warsaw, and they would like, they've told us that they're learning about gender equality throughout history. Really, really interesting. So with this in mind, they want to know whether female MPs are treated the same as male MPs. So Apsana, would you like to come in on that first?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say really is that we obviously have come a long way, because women actually died for the vote, and we have that in our country's history, and we acknowledge and we remember those that did form the suffragette movement. Emily Davison actually threw herself in front of one of the king's horses to protest against measures to stop women having the vote. So we have that history, but we also have, I see as a legacy as well of the women that really fought to have representation. But I think if we really think about women MPs being treated the same or not as male MPs, I'd say in a lot of ways we're not, and I'm not sure that we want to be treated the same. We want to be treated equally, and to be treated equally is to meet the needs of people where they are, because we're so diverse as people, and we're diverse and we are different from men. So there are a number of measures that have been implemented, but could be developed further, to help women do the best they can and do as equally good as men as representatives. And one of the things that the APPG has been looking at is maternity leave, for example, being available for women, whether they are a senior minister or whether they're a junior minister or whether they are a backbench MP as well, and making sure that that's available to all women, because why not? Because this is about meeting the needs of women, to make sure that we can be on par with men in politics.
Thank you so much. Tonya, what's your view on this? Do you think women and men MPs are treated the same?
I think society generally treats us differently. I mean, my classic example is, well, when I came into Parliament, my son had just turned 13. So it was very difficult, living 4 hours away on the train, to be able to balance those kind of issues. And it is more apparent that it is a challenge for women to have children. They do, obviously, but in Parliament, and be able to interact the way that they have been for years, and be on the green benches. And what's been one positive to come out of COVID is the virtual Parliament. So I think moving forward, we need to be looking how women who have got young children and are balancing family life, or maybe they're single parents like myself, how do they balance that? And will the virtual Parliament be there in the future, in order to enable and empower women to come into Parliament? Because that is going to be a hurdle that for the future, if we don't look to modernise.
Thank you very much. That's probably something we can look at in other industries as well, beyond politics, isn't it? How virtual working is going to make lots of workplaces more accessible to women. Jane, would you like to come in on this? What's your view?
Yeah, I've been fairly happy with my treatment as a woman in politics. I don't really perceive a great deal of difference to how I've been treated within my party. And I think I'd never really thought about gender equality. This is a very weird admission. But before I came into politics, I was a classical musician and I was a teacher. I taught singing to people. So in classical music, people write music for men or women. So I would get a job because I was a woman, or if it was a male part, it would go to a man. So I'm late to the party here with the gender equality things. But I'm, as Apsana said, there's now legislation to make sure we're treated equally. And I think if any woman in Parliament did feel there were issues, or she wasn't being given the same chances as men, I think they'd be talking about that quite loudly. So, I'm sure there's still bits of legislation to tie up. I think parental leave, shared parental responsibility, all of those things are ongoing work in progress. But I think if we look 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, huge strides have been made. And I think, the pathway's pretty much clear. If anyone's watching this and is thinking about coming into politics, definitely do it.
Thank you very much. And thank you as well to St Patrick's Primary for that question. That was a great question. We'll move on now to a question from Balweary High School in Kirkcaldy in Scotland. And they would like to know if you've ever experienced people doubting you for wanting to become a politician and because you're a woman. So really interesting question. Shall we start with Tonya on this one?
Well, that is an absolutely brilliant question, because yes is the answer to that. Because when I was knocking on doors in 2017 and talking to my constituents, well, before they were my constituents, it was interesting that they would be questioning how I was going to manage the kind of the attention that I would be getting as an MP, how I would cope with family life, being a single mother and looking after my son. And people were kind of saying, well, how can you do that and be all of these things? And and also it's been pointed out to me that, really, are you aware of the impact that social media will have on your family as well? Because it becomes such a personal space where you are public property. And yeah, it is because you're a woman and we do get more negative attention in that way. But the best thing about that is to pull your shoulders back and be proud of what you've achieved and realise that, we are making a difference. We are trailblazers for future generations. And that is what really keeps me positive about being a female member of parliament.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Jane, how about you? Do you feel that you experience people doubting you for wanting to become a politician at all?
I don't think, because I was a woman, I think I came from an unusual background for an MP. Certainly, I was a self-employed musician, and people's perception, I think, of an MP is a white man in a suit quite often, because if you look through history, I think one of the extraordinary things when you're walking along the corridors of Parliament, and they do look a little bit like Hogwarts, but you've got pictures on the walls of MPs 100 years ago, 80 years ago, 60 years ago, and they are some exclusively are men, with big top hats on. But recently it's changed a little bit. But I think my barriers were more about my professional background, and the fact it was a bit odd for someone from an arts background who'd always been self-employed to come in. I don't think it was because I was a woman. I hope not. So, but you just have to keep going. Decide that you want to help your community. You want to help shape politics and get involved. And I think most women, make that message quite clear. And I think we're in a quite different place now. So no.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thank you. Apsana, how do you feel about this question? Did you ever experience people doubting you before you became an MP?
I think it happened almost every day during my election, and it's something that I had to really begin to grapple with really, really early on in my campaign. And I think the way I try to overcome it, and I still do try and sort of work at it and have like a daily practice of really affirming myself, is to, make sure and understand that my self-worth is not connected in any way to the external or what anybody else thinks of me. It's about having a really strong set of values and really keeping in focus why I decided to do it. And if you have that real strong why and you keep coming back to that, then you'll overcome any sort of imposter syndrome, any sort of external invalidation of who you are and what you can do. I know I definitely had it, particularly in terms of doubt, because I'm a younger woman in particular. So I've just turned 30, and I think a lot of that sort of came, with the idea of you're an inexperienced woman. And actually, when I arrived in Parliament, I met many other younger MPs as well, elected in 2019. And then also just realised like how much of my life and work experience I was utilising in my role. And it's been a year and we've been through a pandemic, and as Jane has sort of really said, it's been sort of a steep learning curve, but I feel like I know exactly what my role is and I'm really confident about it. And all of those things have kind of dissipated. But I think it's just really important to keep sort of that daily affirmation going in that practice and keep coming back to that why.
That's lovely to hear. Thank you. And something for everyone watching to take away as well, that affirmation and self-belief. So thank you. We'll move on to another question now, which is about politics, but then society a little bit more widely. What do you think are the remaining barriers in the way of gender equality? So both in Parliament and more broadly in society as well. I think we'll come to Jane for this one first.
Thanks, Becca. It's a very interesting question and a very big question. I think in Parliament, I don't think there are that many barriers, but I think I think it goes right back to very young children and then young adults having the confidence to express themselves. And I think when I was young, which was a little while ago, there was that thing that if a boy were organising his classmates, he'd be a leader, and a woman would be bossy. Or what a bossy young girl. And I think that really has changed in our schools now, which is brilliant. You know, we need to spot leaders and empower young people to just feel confident saying what they think, getting their opinions out there. And I think learning to debate one another when they're really young, I think that would have a big impact on the sort of people coming into politics. As far as the wider barriers in society, I think the only barriers remaining are people's perceptions of certain roles and the history of those roles. But we know we've got more female students studying STEM subjects. I'm really lucky this year. I'm spending some time with the Royal Navy and I'm meeting the most extraordinary women in the Royal Navy. There are people who are warfare officers and, cyber intelligence officers. They're doing incredible jobs. So I think as young women see women in these sorts of roles that traditionally were more male, I think society, it's shifting really quickly. And I think the young people hopefully watching this video won't feel there are any barriers. And, with confidence and with determination, they're going to be able to go into whatever sort of job and whatever sort of career they'd like to go into.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Tanya, would you like to come in next?
I mean, there should be no barriers in the way for any woman in today. They shouldn't be there. Unfortunately, they do still exist. I think there are issues around equal pay that we need to keep fighting about and just raising awareness. And also post-COVID, we've got barriers to face there because women have been working from home. They may have lost their jobs. They have the children to look after, and we need people to be aware that women play such a vital role in keeping society together. And also I think it's about challenging attitudes and changing mindsets. What Jane has just said now about people, women in the forces, they play a vital role, but women in life every single day have got jobs you wouldn't even believe. It's great for us to be sitting here, having this conversation about being women parliamentarians, but in all walks of life, there are extraordinary women, but doing jobs that are there to be done every single day. And I would just say we need to bring these people, these women, out to talk to us, to explain what they're doing and how vital they are to keeping society going.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Apsana, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I was going to say was I think many of the people that have tuned in, or the students have tuned in, I look back when I was a teenager and, we're sort of called the millennial generation, Generation Z. And, the internet became a big thing during when I was at secondary school and we started doing our homework online and things like that. And I think in the greater scheme of things in Parliament, I think to overcome barriers in terms of gender equality is going to be looking at the harassment of women online, for example. And there are pieces of legislation, so laws that are going through Parliament at the moment, which are currently debating, harm being done online, targeting women MPs, but also women just more generally in the public space. So I think that's one of the areas in which there needs to be a greater tackling of harm that can be produced, whether that's harassment, whether that's bullying, and general sort of attitudes towards women as well, stereotypes and things like that that can be really harmful when you're younger, because I certainly felt that permeate through me as well as a young person. And I think the second thing is really intersectionality. So what I mean by that is really, you know, what is the experiences of women against other sort of protected characteristics or other experiences. So what are the experiences of disabled women or ethnic minority women? How does racism impact on women, and what can we do to overcome those barriers are equally important. I think some of those barriers are yet to be overcome, not just in Parliament, but I think in society more generally. And I think sometimes there's an undercurrent of these things, you know, these how these elements interplay in society. Sometimes it's the elephant in the room, and we need to, you know, go past, you know, go beyond just talking about it, but actually start doing something about it. And again, there are areas and places in Parliament where that's happening, but we need to make sure it's at the top of like the agenda everywhere, in every school, in every workplace, in every public space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for answering that question. That brings us on to our final question today, which is a fantastic question from the Arthur Terry School in Sutton Coldfield. And that question is, if you could just do one thing to inspire more women to engage with and enter politics, what would it be? So I'll ask Tonya first, I think.
The problem with that question is I can think of a million things that I want to do to empower girls to get into politics. I think for me, the number one thing is to be a good, positive role model and a mentor. So when I get the opportunity, the one thing that I love doing is, you know, literally showing girls the way around Parliament, what my job entails, and being a positive role model and a mentor for young girls everywhere. And when I have the opportunity to do that on a one-to-one basis, I do make sure that I do it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Apsana.
It's hard, like Tonya, it's hard to think of one thing that we could do to inspire and engage more women. But I remember my first day in Parliament and sitting in the chamber and looking around and realizing it hit me at that time that actually there was no woman that had ever been elected who wears a hijab like me. And I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders to inspire and engage more women like me, but to engage more women in general. And I think that's part and parcel of my sort of daily work, is to keep ensuring that all of my work reflects, you know, how much I'm sort of engaging women, how much I'm inspiring women. I was proud to, you know, be campaigning and get elected on a campaign led by women. And I would like to see a world where, you know, for me in particular, I think really gets to the crux of why I stood, or what I want to see in terms of, you know, to inspire and engage more women. I'd like to see a world where women are not held responsible for the actions that they're not responsible for. You know, I'm the chair of the APPG on domestic abuse and violence. I want to see a world where women are not held responsible for the honor of their family, their community, or society, where a woman's choice or mistakes are not amplified and held against them unreasonably, and where women are not held responsible for the reputation of others, and where young women in particular are not disengaged and disempowered from engaging the political in the political space, because ultimately that's where we're going to get laws and greater protection and opportunities for all women.
Thank you so much. Jane, what do you think on this? How would you inspire more young women to get involved?
Well, I think what Apsana and Tonya just said is so important, to be visible and to be visible role models for young women, and to be accessible. And the fantastic work the Education Department, I know in Parliament, does do, just to give you a plug. But I think school visits are incredibly important, and that's been a really sad consequence of the pandemic, that we haven't been able to welcome schools into Parliament. But I'm certainly very keen to get engaged with that. And I think the general thing about politics that I really would like to promote is just toning down the social media rhetoric. We've heard a little bit about it earlier, but I think that abuse level that sometimes is more keenly aimed at women, I think we know it does put young women off getting involved in politics. And I think learning, and again, we go back to primary school, learning to disagree well. And you can have a completely different opinion to someone, but you can really like them and you can still be friends and you can get on and you can go for cups of coffee together. And, you know, I think that's really important, that people see people from different parties with different beliefs, different faiths, different backgrounds. Everything can be completely different, but you can still get on with people. And I think if I can work constructively with people from every background in my constituency and represent everyone, I hope that will pave the way for more women.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And thank you for answering all of those questions. It's been such a brilliant way to celebrate International Women's Day by hearing about all your experiences. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of you at home for submitting such brilliant questions and for watching. And we really hope you enjoyed today's Learn Live. If you want to keep up to date with all the exciting things that the Education and Engagement team are doing to celebrate Women's History Month and International Women's Day, just make sure you follow us on Twitter at UK PARL Education. And check out our website as well for all the exciting things on offer. So thank you all so much again. Thank you to our panel. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.